The first place to start, actually, is this California law. And I'll just briefly explain what it's about. So this law is called SB 826. It was signed into law last week by Governor Jerry Brown of California. And the law says that publicly traded companies that are headquartered in California are now required to have at least one female member on their board by the end of next year. It's something they have to do. If they fail to do this, they can be fined up to $100,000 for the first offense, and then every subsequent offense after that, $300,000 if you don't have at least one female on your company's board. By 2021, this law aims to have close to 50% women on every board for every publicly traded company in California. So if you have a board of 5 people, at least 2 must be women. If it's a board of 6 people, they want it to be at least 3 women, and so on. This is similar to some laws that you've seen in European countries like Germany. I believe it's 30% women are mandated on every board, and I think maybe it's Finland and France is the other country. Or maybe it's Norway and France. Now I'm thinking about it. I think it's close to 40% have to be women. So this seems to be a trend, at least in some Western European countries, and it's a trend in California, which is sort of a bellwether for leftist, progressive policies in the United States. California and New York are sort of the epicenter for the left in America as far as policy goes. So if this gains traction, we may see this occur nationwide. So many people, naturally, will think this is a good thing. They'd say, well, who could oppose it? I mean, all you're asking is for fairness. You're asking for just one woman on a board. You know, how can you not find a qualified woman? I'm sure you can find somebody who's going to be a good fit. And isn't it unfair if women are underrepresented on boards? Shouldn't it be something that the government should try to correct? Well, I don't think it is. I think this is a negative law. I think it's a pretty bad development. I think it's actually, if you want to look at it technically speaking in an economic sense, this is actually a fascist policy because it's the government dictating to corporations how they should and shouldn't conduct their business. It's telling them how they should run their board, which is something that's something the company itself should be responsible for managing, not a role of the government. And I think that's the most important point to be made here. This isn't a violation of property rights. It's a violation of that company's owners and stockholders to vote on who should be on that board. It should be the best person for the job, and the gender shouldn't matter. Of course, I don't believe men and women are different intellectually. I think they have the same intellectual capacities. So I don't think, a priori, I wouldn't say that I think women are any worse on a board than men. But if the only people that company has on their board is men and it's working fine for them, why should you force them to have a woman? It's actually unfair to the people they've already hired that are men. Think about all the men that had to be fired to make room for the women that are going to be taking those jobs. Why does the government have any say in that? This is an arrangement that was conducted between the company and the person on the board. It's a private transaction. Why is the government now coming in with a gun and regulating this to the point where people's lives are going to be ruined? I don't think that it's proper. I think it's really bad from that perspective. Now, there's going to be people who disagree with me. Now, one common objection might be, well, Rob, aren't you being a little hasty here? Isn't it true that women have been discriminated against by men and they don't have as much representation on these boards? Is it only fair that women get put on these boards to make up for the discrepancy? I don't think so. I'm an individualist, not a collectivist. I don't think in terms of groups or genders or races or anything like that. I think in terms of individuals. I think all that exists at the end of the day are individual people. They trade with one another. They make deals. They basically get promoted or fired based on how good a job they do. And to basically mandate that some group quota has to be satisfied is to basically place the collective over the individual. It's to say that the collective matters more than the individuals. It's more real than the individuals. In philosophy, we call this doctrine collectivism. It's the idea that the group has more primacy, more reality than the individuals that comprise that group. To make this concrete, let's think about this just in terms of a particular situation. Let's suppose we're talking about affirmative action. Let's say we're talking about, which, this board law is an instance of affirmative action. Let's suppose you have 4 positions open for a job, positions 1 through 4, and let's say you've got 8 applicants, 4 men and 4 women. Just for the sake of the example, let's suppose they all go through the same interview process. Maybe they're given a test, maybe they're interviewed by some people who work at the company. The way I see it, if you can interview these 8 candidates and place them on a scale from 1 to 8, from the best person for the job to the worst person for the job, your best goal in mind as an employer should be to take the top 4. If you judge their test scores, their interview results, and you look at it as an individualist would, you would say, I want the 4 best applicants for the job. Now, let's say in my example that it happens to be the case that of the 4 at the top, 3 of them are men, 1 of them is a woman. In that situation, you're ruling in favor of the individuals. You're saying, I want the best individuals for the job, and I don't really care that much about the groups. All I care about is the best person for the job gets the job. Now, let's reverse it. Let's say instead of thinking about it from an individual perspective, I thought about it from a collectivist perspective. Now, instead of saying I want the best 4 people for the job, my first priority is I need to satisfy this constraint that we have 2 men and 2 women. So what's going to happen? Well, we have the first 4 people. 2 of them, let's say, are men. Let's say number 1 is a man, number 2 is the woman, and then there's number 3 and number 4 are both men. Well, we'll hire 1, and we'll hire 3. Those are our 2 men, and 4 is out of luck because those 2 men slots have been taken up already. We need another woman. So let's say the 5th person in line is another woman. We'll hire her. So now we've hired 1, 2, 3, and 5 instead of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So who loses? Well, 4 does. He is essentially sacrificed for the sake of the group, for the collective. He's penalized not for who he is, not for who he is as an individual, but for who he is as part of a demographic or a statistic. And the company is actually worse off for it, because now they've essentially taken someone who is better qualified by their own standard, number 4, and replaced it with someone who is worse, number 5. Now, the logic of this argument doesn't change if in the top 4 you've got 3 women or 3 men or 2 men and 2 women. It doesn't matter. You should always go for the best person for the job and not try to satisfy some collective criteria. Because when you do that, you're sacrificing individuals, which is a big no-no if you're an individualist like me. Now, one other thing I want to say about this, and some people will make this argument, well, discrimination is something that we know is wrong, but there are people who hold the view, and until the view changes, we need laws like this to make it so that men and women can be made to be closer together, so that they can be brought more equal. Well, to this I would say, first of all, it's not important that men and women as aggregates are equal. I think, like I said, as long as every individual person has the freedom to pursue whatever opportunities they want and to pursue their own interests without fear or molestation from the government or from force, that's what you should be aiming for. But let's suppose you really did want to make it equal. Does this law achieve that? No way. All it does is drive misogyny and hatred for women deeper underground. Now you've got people who basically are going to satisfy the law at point of a fine. Instead of getting fined, they're going to pick whatever person they can to satisfy the criteria, and they'll move on. And then if you mandate that, half the board is women, what's going to happen is they're going to hire half the women, and maybe they'll pay them to, be quiet, or they'll disenfranchise them on the board. All it's going to do is basically make people do things to avoid a penalty. They're not learning anything new. You're not actually teaching them why their original attitude was wrong. This is why you cannot change people's opinions with force. You cannot hold a gun to someone's head and tell them to be rational. Okay? It's not possible to force a mind to be rational. All you can do, the only way to fight irrationality and ignorance is by rationality and better ideas. You have to teach people that men and women are intellectually equal. You have to show them evidence and show support for the better ideas if you want those ideas to prevail. Using a gun, using the power of the government is not going to help you one iota. And in fact, it will hurt you in the long run. Because now these people haven't been taught to think, how can you expect them to make any other decisions in their life? If they rely on the government to tell them who to put on their board, well, you can make that argument for just about anything else in society. if you don't leave people free to use their own judgment and learn about these things, you're not going to progress as a society. You're not going to progress as individuals. So I think across the board, this is a disaster. It's a bad law. And I understand there are people who are, have noble ideas about why this law is good, but I think they are ultimately mistaken in that view. So that's all. Hi, Rob here. Did you like what you saw? If you're really interested and want to see more, click the link below and check out my YouTube channel to see full episodes of the One in the Many videocast. Thanks. Hope to see you later. Bye.